Fearless Building, if you have a Bible, if you turn with me actually to the book of Ezra. We're going to the book of Ezra, even though we're talking on Nehemiah. We're going to start in the book of Ezra, chapter 4. Let me just, one other quick announcement. Thank you, everybody that helped us with our trunk or treat holiday fest at the campuses, at the 3 campuses that did it in Mondovi and at Chippewa Falls in here. Low estimates, I'll tell you this is low, about 1,500 people came through. Just absolutely incredible. And yeah, go ahead, that is incredible. Fed a lot of people, had some great conversations with people, so thank you for helping us do that. Thank you for lifting it up in prayer. Fearless Building, what that looks like, I have a key point, which I call fight the agenda, embrace the assignment. How did we get there? Kind of a quick thing, an agenda assignment. An agenda, I'll be defining these 2 terms as we go along, but agenda is our own plan or idea. What we think that we're going to do. How many have ever had that happen? You got a plan and it derails and you end up doing something else and that's it. My wife and I used to be more free spirit, then you have a family that ties down. We even did vacations where we just go driving and then decide on the way, do we turn left or right? Are we going to end up here or there? Are we going to D.C. or Niagara? And we just went east, Not really a plan there, but agenda has a very specific plan that you kind of lay out. And an assignment is just stepping in obedience to the assignment or plan that's in front of us. And the challenge here for us is, are we really fulfilling the assignment that God has for us? I'm going to give you a couple clues, a couple highlights, how to tell, because we're all doing things and we all just assume we're doing everything God has for us, and how to really check that in our own life. I kind of look at the story of Aaron, even though I had you turn to Ezra. Aaron, this is Moses' older brother. Moses had a conversation with a burning bush. Can you imagine that? How many would love to find God's will because a bush burns in front of you and actually talks? It's pretty clear, right? So I'm walking the other day, and here's this tree, flame red, and I stopped, and is this God? And then I saw it was a maple tree with red leaves. Didn't get anything from it, so it was a little disappointment there. But Moses had this conversation, and God says, I want you to be a mouthpiece. And Moses said, I'm not talking. And so he said, okay, pick up your brother Aaron. He'll be your mouthpiece. And so Aaron's got an assignment he walked into, but the only reason he's doing it is nobody else would do it. How many have ever stepped into an assignment like that? Nobody's doing it, and I just have to do it. And you wonder, is this really what God's got for me? I don't know. Aaron's about 84 years old, and he's got to do it. And then one of the first stories we have about Aaron is he throws, his version is he threw all this gold into the fire and out came an idol. I don't know how that happened. How many have tried that in their backyard with, I'm just going to throw stuff in and see if something really awesome pops out. I just find ashes. He tried it. He blew it. And so the people we're talking about, Aaron and Nehemiah today, they're not perfect in any way, shape, or form. In fact, at the end of Nehemiah, there's literally a story where he goes out and says he's trying to bring people back to God and they're not listening to him. And Nehemiah says he literally grabbed them by the hair, pulled their hair out, screaming at them. How many know? How many feel you have that gifting? There's people I'd like to straighten out. And so Nehemiah's got his shortcomings. How many are grateful that the people in the Bible have shortcomings? Well, God, thank you that they're not perfect in this way, all right? And so they're there. When it comes to an agenda, people, I told you already, it's a plan for our lives that we have in front of us. But I will tell you, these are little checkpoints. Usually an agenda is this really better for me? I know people that make movement and job movement. Well, it's more pay. It must be God's will. It's a better house. It must be God's will. It's a better, if it's better for us, we just assume it must be God. But I tell you, that can be an agenda rather than an assignment. Because you know what? An assignment is about bringing restoration, God's kingdom. God's assignments are always about his kingdom coming, his will be done here on earth as it is in heaven. It's always about that, and it's not necessarily always a step up. Nehemiah is going to end up in Jerusalem, but we're going to see in a couple weeks that the walls are going to be built, but the city's not built yet. There's no houses in Jerusalem, and they literally have a lottery. What's a lottery? It would be like me having a deck of cards and having you pull out a card, and if you get a queen, or let's just say hearts. Let's make it more than just the queens. Let's make the hearts. If you get a heart, you have to live in Jerusalem, and the Bible literally says it that way. You have to live in Jerusalem, because the people that live there, the other people go, we'll be praying for you. So going to Jerusalem at this point in time is not a step up, because where's Nehemiah living? Help me out. He's living in a palace, isn't he? And then to move to a place where there aren't even houses, there's nothing there, that's not necessarily a promotion, but he's stepping into the assignment. And so the first thing is, people, an assignment is positioned for us. There's a positioning in an assignment, that where we are is exactly where God wants us to be at this time. There's a realization. So many times it's so easy to complain about where we are because we're always looking ahead. I can't wait until I do this. I can't wait until I do that. We're always living ahead. And we never embrace where we're at right now, because we just endure where we're at on the way to where we're going. We're enduring. We see all the problems. We see all the frustrations around us. Let me tell you how God looks at certain things. The Bible says in Isaiah chapter 46, verse 10, God starts at the end and goes to the beginning. He knows the end already, and then he brings us to the end he has for us. He knows the ending, and he brings us to the ending he has for us. He doesn't start at the beginning, and a situation comes up in your life, and then he goes, well, what am I going to do now? Oh, I got to do this, and I got to do that, and constantly adjusting. He knows where he's taking you, and he will bring you there. Well, what if I make a wrong choice? He is able to still get you to where he wants you to be. He knows the end. And there's kind of an assurance of that. Suppose you're watching a football game, and your team is down by 3 or 4 touchdowns, and it's just a blowout. If you know the ending score that you win, how many know? It doesn't matter how far you fall behind. In fact, if you know the ending score, the worse you fall behind, the more excited you're going to be, like, how are they going to come back from this? Isn't that the truth? Because you know the end. It's just like, oh, I've got to see this. This is going to be phenomenal. People, if we understand that with God, whatever the situation that's in front of us, if we know God has an ending for us, how should our attitude change? How are you going to get me through this one? What is going to be the end result of this? Because God knows the end. A couple verses that rather than just pull one out. We are his workmanship, created in Jesus Christ for good works. You're created for good works. You are created for good works. You are not created to be a failure. You're not created to be a has-been. You're not created just to be shelved. Well, I used to do good works. I'm not doing anything now. None of us are created to be shelved. We're created for good works, which God has prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. God prepared them beforehand that we need to walk in these things. Psalm 37:23, because the idea would say, well, do I have a choice in my life then, or what's going on? The steps of a righteous man are ordered by the Lord. People, as we are righteous, we step into what God has for us. We step into the good works God has for us. So there's a path that God has for us, and we line up with that path. There's an assignment that God has for us. Now, I said turn to Ezra. We're in Nehemiah, but Ezra happened at the exact same time as Nehemiah. Ezra is already in Jerusalem. He brought people there, and he's building the temple. Nehemiah is still in the palace. Ezra is already there. The enemies come against Ezra just like they're going to come against Nehemiah, and they come and say, this is wrong that they're building the city. And what they do is they write a letter to a man called Artaxerxes. They write a letter and said, don't let them rebuild Jerusalem. It's a horrible town. Research it. Find out if what we're saying is true. And you'll see it, chapter 4 of Ezra. Artaxerxes sends this reply, verse 18, "The letter you sent me has been translated and read to me. I ordered a search of the records and found out that Jerusalem has indeed been a hotbed of insurrection against many kings. In fact, rebellion and revolt are normal there." What a great history Jerusalem has. Rebellion and revolt are the norms. "Powerful kings have ruled over Jerusalem." He's talking about David. He's talking about Hezekiah. He researched this. And look what he comes out with. "The city, therefore," verse 21, "issue orders to have these men stop their work. That city must not be rebuilt except at my express command. Be diligent and don't neglect this matter, for we must not permit this situation to harm the king's interest." The king said, what? This city must not be rebuilt except I decide to, because my interest must not be hurt. How many think that's pretty powerful? Now, if you read through the whole Bible, there's a line that comes up numerous times. It comes up in Daniel, it comes up in Esther, that if the Persian kings say something, they cannot pull it back. Darius said, anybody that prays to me, to anybody else but me, gets thrown in the lions. Daniel prayed to God. He said, I can't take that line back. He had to throw him in the lion's den. Xerxes, Esther's husband, says all the Jews need to be killed. He changes his mind. He said, but I can't do anything about the law. So they have another law that says our army will defend all the Jewish people. So once they say something, it can't be pulled back. Now, Artaxerxes just said that city will not be built again. It could hurt my interest unless I decide it. Okay? Once he says something, it can't come back. You with me on that so far? Nehemiah. Nehemiah is serving under a king called Artaxerxes. Does that name sound familiar? I just mentioned it 30 seconds ago. He just wrote a letter that said that city will not be rebuilt. It will harm the king's interest. Nehemiah is placed right where he needs to be to do the assignment he needs to do. Some friends come up to Nehemiah and he said, how's Jerusalem doing? And they said, absolutely horrible. And he starts to weep and pray and fast. People, he does that for what we estimate about 4 months. How many have ever prayed for something for a long time and you're wondering, are you ever going to answer? Let me tell you, God has perfect timing in the assignment of what he has, because this letter, during that 4 months, this letter had to be written that made the situation even worse. Nehemiah's crying out, oh God, rebuild Jerusalem. Oh God, would you do something about Jerusalem? And then he hears about this letter. Jerusalem will not be rebuilt. It's against my interest. So you're praying about something and the situation gets worse. Now Nehemiah is standing in front after praying for about 4 months in Nehemiah chapter 2. He said, I was serving the king his wine. I'd never appeared sad in his presence. So the king asked me, why are you so sad? You don't look sick to me. You must be deeply troubled. And he said, then I was terrified. Why would Nehemiah be terrified? What did the king just write? I'm not going to have Jerusalem rebuilt. Why is Nehemiah sad? Jerusalem's not rebuilt. So Nehemiah, a slave, is going to stand in front of the king of the world and say, I think you are way wrong. We need to rebuild Jerusalem. How many know? All he was a slave in the king's palace, and God had him exactly where he needed to be for that purpose. And so what happens is he said, man, long live the king. It's always good to butter people up. How can I not be sad? The city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins and the gates have been destroyed. Look at the king. Well, how can I help you? With a prayer to the God of heaven. Oh, God, how many know prayers don't have to be real long? Oh, God, pay attention. You know what? That'd be a great prayer sometimes. You're going through it. Pay attention, God. Here it is. Nehemiah comes out. And he said, with a prayer to the God of heaven, I replied, if it please the king, send me to Judah so I can rebuild Jerusalem. And then I love this. Artaxerxes looks at the queen. We talked about this before. Who's that queen? Anybody remember? It's not his queen. It's Esther. There's my good friend. There's Queen Esther. I just said we're not going to rebuild Jerusalem. What does he do? God turns his heart in a second. He goes, how long are you going to be gone? How long are you going to be gone, man? How long is this going to take? People, he leaves for 12 years. I'll be back in 12 years. Awesome, go. Isn't that incredible? People, when you're in an assignment, how many know you're placed right where you need to be? The situation might look disastrous around you. It may look like we're going to die now. He's a slave. It'd have been really easy for Artaxerxes just to kill him and get somebody else to eat my food. But he stepped right into it because where we're placed is where we need to be at that moment, at that period of time. People, that's embracing the assignment. If you're in an agenda, there's no way you're talking to the king after that letter came out. If it's an agenda, you're like, I'm not doing that. I don't see how that will benefit me. If you're in an assignment, we need to step up. We need to believe that God has us exactly where we need to be. And so Nehemiah takes off. And I've shared this with you so many times, and I have to keep sharing this with you. People, that God will always give us more than we can handle. He doesn't know how to rebuild walls. He doesn't know how to rebuild Jerusalem. He will always give us more than we can handle. And then the idea, oh, everything happens for a purpose. No, it doesn't. There's Satan and there's chaos. God is able to take every purpose and turn it around for his good, but everything doesn't happen for a purpose. There's warfare. There's evil in the world. And God is big enough to take those horrible things and bring them around. But don't sit there and say, well, this is a horrible situation, but everything happens for a purpose. No, it doesn't. Fight. Go against it. Bring the kingdom of God. The kingdom of light has to shatter darkness. It's our calling. We sit there and say, God, turn this around for your purpose. This is not, I don't believe that this is your purpose. Turn it around for your purpose. So Nehemiah goes. An agenda rules with a title. An assignment serves with a towel. He's not going there to rule. He's going there to serve. And when he went there, once you guess, resistance comes. We talk so much about this resistance. Let me just highlight just two things. The enemies come and try to destroy him. He's building the walls. Carl came and a couple weeks ago, and he had his sword. He was flashing around about building the walls and holding the sword. I asked him if I could borrow that sword. He wouldn't let me have it. Doggone him. He get his fingers off that thing. It was a nice sword. He knew I wouldn't give it back. And so, he was there, rebuilding the walls and then holding the sword in your hand at the same time. I would demonstrate that one again, but how many notice Carl's got bigger arms than I do? He's just a little stronger. And, I've talked about it. My wife and I were watching a movie once, or a show. It was a show. And there were these guys with all these huge muscles on, and I'm looking at my wife, and she's watching. I go, oh, man, nice, you're watching all that. She goes, I don't care about big muscles. I just like small, insignificant muscles like you have. And I'm like, that's the way I heard it, people. That's all I'm telling you. That's the way I heard it. That may not be the exact words that came out of her mouth, but how many know sometimes words come out of the mouth and they're filtered through your ears going to your brain? And I'll tell you, we watch one of those body things with the veins sticking out. Oh, I hate those. I'd rather have small, insignificant muscles like you. We're all good. You got to realize the huge gamble I take of giving my wife the microphone every morning. She's very good at just saying welcome and we're glad you're here. She may have a different point of view of some of the illustrations I give you. But people, we can't accomplish it in our own power. And Nehemiah begins to go forth. And look at there's just two battles that will happen that will really determine if it's an assignment or an agenda. He goes in Nehemiah chapter 6. He goes to visit someone that's confined to his home because he's a servant. And he goes there, and the person said, let us meet together inside the temple and bolt the door shut. Your enemies are coming to kill you tonight. That's what this guy said. Now, you got to remember, there's no city. There's no houses. There's no cars to lock yourself in. If someone's coming to kill you, you're sleeping in a tent. There's one safe place. Lock yourself in the temple. That's basically what he's saying. Lock yourself in the temple. Nehemiah comes back, and he said, should someone in my position run from danger? Should someone in my position enter the temple to save his life? No, I won't do it, because it was forbidden that anybody but the priest go into the temple. And then he says this line. He said, I realized that God had not spoken to him, even though he uttered a prophecy. So this wasn't just someone talking. This is someone trying to manipulate, because you know what? People, agendas will always try to manipulate. They will prophesy. God told me. And how many know once you say God told me, it's really hard to argue with them? Because I'm not just talking with you. I'm talking with what you believe God heard. And it's so easy just to add that title, God told me. Can I just tell you a little caveat I use? I just use the term, I believe God said. Because guess what? I'm not always 100% accurate. And wouldn't it be much better to just say, I believe this is what I'm supposed to do, rather than definitive, God told me to tell you. Because guess what? We're wrong sometimes. We miss it. We don't do what we're supposed to do. And some people with agendas try to manipulate others. My wife had someone before we were married prophesy over her that she was supposed to marry him. After that cut about the muscle, she may be regretting not going that direction. But how many know that was a manipulation thing? I'm trying to manipulate in her life. People, agendas will try to manipulate through prophetic words. I'm trying to control you. I'm trying to tell you what God's will is for your life. But he balanced it. That guy had a prophetic word, but he also knew what the Bible said. Nobody but the priest better go into the temple. So he stood on that. People with agendas will always try to manipulate others to get them to do guilt trips. And I feel like that as a pastor. Sometimes I tell you that when we come across with a message, I said, all I can do is make you feel guilty, and that's not my goal. I just want us to walk in what God has for us. You know, I'm not trying to manipulate anybody, but agendas will always try to manipulate others. And then look at this other thing, that when you have an assignment, you're going to see things other people don't see. During those 52 days, verse 17 of chapter 6, one of the enemies that's against him is a guy named Tobiah. And Tobiah happened to be married to one of the leaders. And they sent letters back and forth. Verse 19, they kept telling me about Tobiah's good deeds, and they told me everything I said. And yet Tobiah kept sending threatening letters to intimidate me. What's happening there? People, when you walk an assignment, you're going to have insight that other people don't have. All the leadership around Nehemiah are saying, Tobiah's this incredible guy. But in your eyesight, he keeps trying to manipulate. He's an evil person. Now, what would have been the easy thing for Nehemiah to do? Show him the letters. The guy is it okay to say the word jerk? No, it isn't, so I won't say jerk. Because if I said jerk, I would say Tobiah's a jerk, but I won't go that direction. He's not a nice guy. And he's sitting there, and he said he's not a nice guy. You know what, people? When you have an assignment, you let God fight for you. Because we could sit there and fight over Tobiah. But guess what? That's not Nehemiah's calling, to fight over Tobiah. His calling's to build a wall. His calling is to create a city. And sometimes we can get distracted even by other people. I remember when we had Renee Pilsing here. She's an evangelist that goes around. And she told the story about how this pastor, she preached, and then this pastor came up afterwards and she said, and Renee's going to pray with everybody here today. And she looked around, there were 300 people there. She goes, oh. 300 people I'm going to pray with. And what happened is Renee started praying with the first person, and they just started acting up, and it just really a scene, and I don't know what this is. And she was praying for about 5 minutes with this person, and all of a sudden it dawned on her, this is a distraction because God wants her to pray with everybody. People, distractions to our calling. Distractions to our assignment. How many know we need discernment today? We need discernment. God, don't let me get distracted. So Tobiah's there, and everybody's talking good about him. I can't get distracted. I have to do the assignment that God has laid in front of me. Everything coming against us. I love what Bishop Tony Miller said. We don't fight for victory. We fight from victory because the battle has already been won. And lastly, you know what the agenda does? It's always looking for a promotion. But when you're in assignment, your comfort level changes. Your comfort level changes. After 12 years, Nehemiah went back to the palace. Now, where he's living, there's no city, there's no houses, there's a wall, there's enemies. He's fighting nonstop. He's fighting Tobiahs. He's fighting nobles. It's rough. And he's living back in the palace. Which job sounds cushier to you? Palace. And you know what he says? Can I go back to Jerusalem? Because the palace just isn't comfortable anymore. I'm not comfortable here. I've talked to people that live for Jesus for a while, and you know what? The things they used to do just aren't comfortable anymore. This is what I'm called to do. I'm not happy there anymore. And you don't even have to tell them, hey, quit doing that, quit doing it. No, it's not my comfort level anymore. Paul was a Pharisee, part of the Sanhedrin at the beginning of Acts. At the end of Acts, he goes back as a Pharisee in the Sanhedrin, and they come against him. Guess what? Jerusalem wasn't his comfort zone anymore. People in assignments, our comfort zone changes. So what do? Aaron's doubting his calling. I'm just filling in for my brother. He's got this stick, this rod. The young people in Jerusalem rise up against Moses. Man, Moses, you're 120 years old. It's time to step aside. How many think it's time for 120-year-olds to step aside? Step aside. It's our turn. Moses goes before God and says, God, is this my calling? What am I going to do? I just feel like a dead stick. Anybody there? When it feels like, what do I really have? I'm talking about assignments. I'm talking about what are we supposed to do for God. And you feel like a dead stick that's just there because nobody else is there. I'm just working where I work. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm just being a mom. I'm just being a father, a husband, wife. What am I supposed to do? You're talking about something way beyond me. Can I tell you? You're planted right where you're supposed to be planted. But all I have, I'm just like a dead stick. This is what God said. He said, I want everybody to bring their dead sticks. 12 tribes. Everybody bring their dead stick and lay it before God. That's all I'm asking you to do, people. Just as a dead stick, come before God and say, here I am. God, I want to walk in your assignment. This is what's in front of me. I want to step into what you have as an assignment. I'm tired of agendas, and I don't even know if it's an agenda or not. God, destroy it. If it's an agenda, destroy it in my life. I want to live the assignment. I want to complete what you have for me. It's just an honesty saying, I don't know if I'm doing it. Aaron went and laid his dead stick before him. And he was probably thinking, man, out of these other people, there's so much better leaders than me. There's so much, Moses is the better one. And you know what happened? In 24 hours, people, God can flip your life around in just a moment. In 24 hours, that wasn't even 24 hours, it was overnight. Aaron's rod, dead stick, budded. Leaves sprouted out. Flowers sprouted out. Almonds grew. How many know even a live stick can't do that overnight? And the next day they brought out his stick and said, look what happened, Aaron. You are on assignment. You are fulfilling a calling. And only you can do it, Aaron. Let's just present ourselves, can we? Stand with me, would you? Fight the agenda. Embrace the assignment. God, we're just dead sticks. Can we just be honest with you? We're just dead sticks. I'm just working where I'm working until I do something really important. Guys, destroy that thought process. Just destroy that thought process. Man, if I just want to have this disability, if I just want to have this, if I just want to have the kids, if I just want to have the wife, if I just want, just one, it's always just one. We could really do something for God. Can we believe that God has an assignment for you right where you're at, in the situation you're at? God, we just present ourselves. We just present ourselves. God, forgive us for complaining, whining, griping. Kill the agenda. God, I want to walk in your assignment. I want to walk in your assignment. Here's what we're going to do. We have communion. In fact, if I can have some leaders, let's spread out communion around. It's just a wafer you can dip in juice. Feel free to do that. They're going to be at different ways. God, just fill me up. I'm going to pray a blessing on you. Feel free to go have communion, but also feel free just to come forward and present yourself. God, this is it. Embrace the assignment. Embrace the assignment. But it's so hard. Embrace the assignment. Believe me, you would not be comfortable anywhere else. You would not be comfortable. God, we present ourselves. Feel free to have communion. Feel free to come present yourself for a few moments. God bless you. Thank you for coming. Let me speak a blessing over you. God, I speak over you that God, in turn, will bless you. He will keep you. He will make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. He will lift up his countenance upon you, and he will give you his peace. Go in the presence, power, and love of Jesus Christ, who promised you that he will form in you everything that makes you pleasing to him. And he will equip you with everything you need to do his will. Claim those as your promises and go on that. Let's just present ourselves.